Samuel L. Jackson's life collapsed. Then he became a legend. Before he became the voice of power, the face of intensity, and the man with the most iconic in cinema history. Samuel L. Jackson was just another addict lying on the floor, forgotten, fragile, and nearly dead. You know, the man who commands every room, whose words shake up studios, who stood toe-to-toe with Jedi superheroes and Tarantino's bullets. But behind that razor-sharp delivery and cold confidence lies a man who crawled out of darkness, addiction, self-hate, and near destruction. This isn't the story of a Hollywood actor who made it big. This is the story of a man who shouldn't have made it at all. Long before Pulp Fiction, before Nick Fury, before his name meant billions at the box office, Samuel Leroy Jackson was drowning. Not in failure, but in something far more deadly: apathy. He'd numbed himself with drugs, hidden himself behind charm and sarcasm, and masked a childhood full of loss, rage, and absence. He spent decades acting just to survive life. What most people don't know is that one of his most legendary scenes, being found passed out on a kitchen floor in Jungle Fever, was not acting at all. It was real. He had lived it. Spike Lee didn't have to direct him to look like a desperate crackhead, because Jackson had been one. His wife LaTanya had dragged him home from real overdoses. His daughter had watched him vanish into a haze of cocaine and excuses. But then, something broke. Or maybe something woke up. On the edge of death, on the brink of becoming just another forgotten name in a rehab file, Samuel L. Jackson stood up. He didn't just beat addiction. He ripped it apart with the same fury you now see in every role. Every stare, every scream, every unforgettable line he delivers on screen is not just performance. It's survival. It's revenge against the version of himself that once almost won. And Hollywood. It had no idea what it was about to unleash. So, the next time you hear that famous voice, feel that presence, and watch him dominate the screen, you're not watching an actor. You're watching a man who came back from the dead. Before the voice, before the fury, before the legacy, Samuel L. Jackson was just a boy raised on broken promises and invisible wounds. Born on December 21, 1948 in Washington, D.C., and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Samuel Leroy Jackson grew up without the presence of a father. His dad, Roy Henry Jackson, was largely absent, battling alcoholism and living miles away in Kansas City. Samuel only saw him twice in his entire life. The man who would become one of the most commanding voices in cinema never had someone to call dad. He was raised by his mother Elizabeth, a factory worker, and later a supplies buyer for a mental institution. She was tough, disciplined, and worked endlessly to provide. But like many black mothers of her generation, her strength came from necessity, not choice. Samuel's grandparents and extended family also stepped in, helping shape a childhood rooted in routine survival and emotional silence. As a child, Samuel was afflicted with a stutter, something most people would never believe today given his vocal dominance. But in those early years, he struggled to form words, often shutting down mid-sentence or repeating syllables out of frustration. The pain of not being heard, of being misunderstood, planted the first seeds of isolation and bottled-up rage. He would later admit that the one word he could always say clearly without stuttering was the same one he would make famous: In school, he was quiet but observant, reserved yet deeply curious. He had no intention of becoming an actor. Initially, Jackson dreamed of a career in architecture and enrolled at Morehouse College in Atlanta, one of the most prestigious historically black colleges in the country. But as fate would have it, one elective drama class would change his entire path. It wasn't a love at first sight moment with acting. It was something deeper, an outlet. The stage became a place where he could unleash the emotions he'd been suppressing for years. It gave him power, clarity, and most importantly, a voice. He switched majors, diving into the world of theater and literature, finding mentorship in the college's tight-knit arts community. But Samuel's journey wasn't just about discovering talent, it was about discovering identity. The late 1960s were a time of political turbulence and racial unrest, and Jackson quickly became involved in the civil rights movement. He protested. He marched. And in 1969, he took part in one of the most radical actions in Morehouse's history, holding the College Board of Trustees hostage in a demand for reform. Among the trustees, none other than Martin Luther King Sr., father of Dr. King. Jackson was expelled, though he would later return to graduate in 1972. During that time of political upheaval, Jackson became increasingly radicalized. He aligned with the Black Power movement and considered becoming a social worker or revolutionary rather than an artist. But when the FBI came knocking, warning his mother that Samuel's life was in danger if he stayed on that path, she packed his bags and sent him away to Los Angeles. That separation wasn't just geographic. It marked the beginning of a new Samuel, one torn between activism and artistry, between rage and redemption. After finishing his degree, Jackson moved to New York City, where he immersed himself in theater. Along the way, he formed a powerful friendship with two then-unknowns, Spike Lee and Morgan Freeman. They would prove pivotal to his future. But life in New York was not glamorous. Jackson worked as a social worker by day and struggled through minor stage roles at night. He lived in cramped apartments, battled self-doubt, and tried to build a name in an industry where black men, especially those who looked and spoke like him, were barely given a seat at the table. It was during this time that Samuel began using drugs. What started as recreational soon spiraled into dependence. Cocaine became his shield against rejection, against loneliness, against his growing sense of failure. Even as he appeared in plays and landed bit parts in films like Coming to America and Goodfellas, Jackson was high most of the time. He thought he had it under control, but in truth, he was unraveling. Then came the breaking point. In 1991, Samuel's wife, actress LaTanya Richardson, whom he had met during his days at Morehouse, and Spellman came home with their daughter Zoe to find him passed out on the kitchen floor surrounded by drugs. It wasn't the first time, but this time she'd had enough. LaTanya gave him an ultimatum: get clean or lose his family. Jackson chose rehab, and it was in that crucible of detox, pain, and honesty that he was forced to confront everything he had buried: his father's abandonment, his childhood stutter, the anger he masked with sarcasm, the feeling of being overlooked and underestimated. When he emerged from rehab, he wasn't the same man. A week later, completely clean, he got a call from Spike Lee offering him a role in Jungle Fever. The character Gator, Purify, a crack addict. It was the performance of a lifetime, because it wasn't a performance at all. Samuel didn't need to act, he simply remembered. The desperation, the lies, the twitching fingers and trembling voice, it was all him, barely a year removed from the man he once was. Critics were stunned. Hollywood took notice. And the man who had once been passed over for every role suddenly became unignorable. From that moment, his rise was meteoric. But it never would have happened without the foundation, without the pain, the silence, the near-death experiences that forced him to fight for his life. When Samuel L. Jackson stepped onto the set of Jungle Fever in 1991, he wasn't just acting, he was resurrecting. Just weeks out of rehab, clean for the first time in years, and finally seeing life with clarity, Jackson poured his pain into the role of Gator, a crack-addicted hustler whose charm couldn't hide his desperation. The performance was electric, terrifying, honest. It wasn't just a breakout moment, it was a detonation. Critics raved. Audiences couldn't look away. And the Cannes Film Festival did something unprecedented. They created a special supporting actor award just for him. At 42 years old, an age when most actors are winding down, Samuel L. Jackson's true career was just beginning. But his rise wasn't about luck. It was about precision, patience, and finally opportunity. Jackson had been grinding in the shadows for over a decade. Bit parts in Goodfellas, Do the Right Thing, and Coming to America had given glimpses of his presence. But now the world saw the full force of his talent. Hollywood was caught off guard. Samuel wasn't like the others. He wasn't trying to be likable. He didn't fit into the soft-spoken leading man mold. He had edge, rage, rhythm. There was fire behind his eyes, a storm in his voice, and no fear in how he spoke. Directors weren't just casting him, they were unleashing him. That same year, he appeared in Patriot Games, and by 1993, he was starring alongside Bruce Willis in Loaded Weapon 1, a comedic turn that proved his versatility. But it was his role as Jules Winfield in Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction 1994 that redefined him and cinema. With a Jerry curl, a pistol, and biblical vengeance, Jackson became a legend. His monologues were poetry dipped in menace. His delivery of Ezekiel 25:17 became one of the most quoted moments in film history. Tarantino, who had written the role specifically for Jackson, said that no one else could have brought Jules to life. The role earned Jackson his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. From there, the floodgates opened. He became Hollywood's favorite weapon, an actor who could command screen time in seconds, elevate any scene, and dominate blockbusters and indie films alike. He starred in Die Hard with a Vengeance 1995, A Time to Kill 1996, Jackie Brown 1997, and The Negotiator 1998, each film showcasing a new shade of Samuel's arsenal, the calculated intellect, the wounded warrior, the unapologetic avenger. But he wasn't just a tough guy. He was a storyteller, and his stories had weight. In A Time to Kill, his courtroom breakdown, yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell, wasn't just performance. It was a primal scream for justice in a country still battling racial violence. That role, playing Carl Lee Haley, made him a cultural touchstone. For black audiences, it was catharsis. For white audiences, it was confrontation. And Hollywood kept calling. The 2000s brought new heights. Jackson became a fixture in franchises, entering the world of Jedi as Mace Windu in Star Wars Episode I, The Phantom Menace. 1999, a role he secured by telling George Lucas directly, "I don't care if I'm just holding a lightsaber in the background. I want in." He not only got in, he made history wielding a purple lightsaber, a color no Jedi had ever used before. In Unbreakable 2000, he teamed with M. Night Shyamalan to deliver a haunting performance as Elijah Price, a brittle-boned mastermind seeking balance in a world of superheroes. It was layered, tragic, and masterful, a performance that aged into genius as the film grew into a trilogy years later. Then came The Incredibles 2004, where Jackson voiced the coolest animated hero in history, Frozone. His delivery of the now iconic line, "Where is my supersuit?" became a meme, a catchphrase, a generational moment. But it was his entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe that would forever alter the course of his career and the industry. In a post-credits scene of Iron Man 2008, Samuel L. Jackson appeared as Nick Fury, head of Shai-ELD, donning the eye-patch trenchcoat and ultimate authority. It was only a few seconds long, but it sent shockwaves through fandom. Marvel had plans, big ones, and Jackson would be at the center of it all. Over the next decade, Samuel appeared in the Avengers, Captain America, Thor, Spider-Man, and countless other MCU titles. He became the glue of the Marvel Universe. Audiences couldn't imagine the franchise without him. Studios couldn't afford to. By 2020, Jackson was named the highest-grossing actor of all time, with his films earning over $27 billion worldwide. Not bad for a man Hollywood once overlooked. But Jackson never chased box office glory. He chased truth. He once said, "I've never been the guy who said, I want to be a movie star. I just want to be a working actor." And he was relentlessly. From Spike Lee joints to Quentin Tarantino, bloodbaths from Marvel blockbusters to obscure indie films, Jackson never stopped working. He didn't care if he was the lead or a supporting role. If the story mattered, he showed up. He also became a beacon for black representation in cinema. Unlike many black actors, Jackson never allowed himself to be typecast. He could play the villain, the mentor, the hero, the addict, the husband, the soldier, or the senator with equal authenticity. And he demanded that the industry recognize the breadth of black identity, not just the pain. Behind the scenes, Jackson continued to lift others up. He mentored young actors, invested in theater, and supported black filmmakers. He gave back to Morehouse, to civil rights organizations, and to communities he knew still faced the barriers he once fought. But even in his rise, Jackson never pretended to be untouchable. He joked often. He cursed freely. He remained human, a rarity in a business that thrives on illusions. He once told a reporter, "I'm not ashamed of where I came from. That darkness, that struggle, that's what made me." And maybe that's why we still can't look away. Because Samuel L. Jackson didn't just conquer Hollywood, he did it on his terms. Without changing his voice, without softening his edge, without selling out who he was. Samuel L. Jackson is a force, a titan, a name that commands respect. But behind every thunderous line and confident stare lies a man who spent decades fighting demons that almost consumed him from the inside out. The Samuel you see today, sharply dressed, unapologetically bold, endlessly quotable, is the result of survival, not ego. And the road that led him to greatness was paved with pain, rage, addiction, and a deep hidden fear that he was never good enough. His anger started young. Raised without a father, he felt abandoned from the moment he could understand what missing meant. He once admitted that he only saw his dad twice in his life, and one of those times was at his funeral. That void created a wound that never fully closed. And like many young black men of his era, Jackson was told to toughen up. Don't cry, don't feel, don't break. So he didn't. He buried it instead. What emerged was a mask, a version of himself that could survive the streets of Chattanooga, the discrimination of the Jim Crow South, and the academic halls of Morehouse College. But that mask came with a cost: emotional numbness. Even as he found acting and activism, Jackson was boiling inside, furious at racism injustice, his absent father, and most of all, himself. When he moved to New York City to pursue theater, things didn't get easier. He was often broke, overlooked, and typecast. The industry was not built for black men like him. He was too intense, too blunt, too real. As rejection piled up, Jackson found solace in something else: drugs. At first, it was functional. Weed, cocaine, a little hit to smooth the edge. But over time, it became ritual, then dependency, then a full-blown addiction. He used to stay up all night high, then roll into auditions pretending to be someone else. And somehow, he pulled it off. He became what he called a high-functioning addict, convincing himself that he was in control even as his life spiraled out. What's terrifying is how good he became at hiding it. Friends recall that he could memorize entire scripts while stoned. He'd show up to work, hit his marks, and disappear back into the fog. But at home, the cracks were impossible to ignore. His wife, LaTanya Richardson, watched the man she loved unravel day by day. Their daughter Zoe saw more than she should have, and by the early 1990s, the dam finally burst. Jackson was found passed out on the kitchen floor, surrounded by drug paraphernalia. This wasn't a scene from a movie, it was real life. His family had to make a decision: either he got help or they were gone. He entered rehab in 1991, angry, ashamed, and terrified. He has said the first few days felt like death. He had to confront every lie he told himself, every hurt he never healed. Therapy forced him to revisit his childhood, his father, his failures. It wasn't glamorous, it was war. But he made it through. And when he stepped out of rehab, he didn't just get a second chance, he rebuilt himself from the ground up. That same year, he was offered the role of Gator in Jungle Fever, a crack addict, an embodiment of everything he had just escaped. Many thought it would be too triggering, too dangerous. But Jackson said yes, not because he wanted to relive it, but because he had to face it. That performance wasn't acting. It was purging. It was a confession on camera, and it set him free. But here's the truth. Few talk about even after getting clean, the emotional aftermath didn't vanish. Samuel still battles with rage he uses as fuel, but must constantly manage. He's spoken candidly about how easy it is for him to go dark, to slip back into old ways. He keeps his life incredibly structured, avoiding parties, heavy drinking, and environments that tempt relapse. His marriage is his anchor. His routine is his protection. And behind the scenes, he's still navigating the weight of always being on the expectations, the image, the cool black guy persona the world demands from him. In interviews, he's quick to joke, quick to curse, quick to deflect, but the moments of silence in between speak volumes. There's also a pain that comes with being necessary but rarely celebrated. Jackson has starred in more billion-dollar films than almost any actor alive. He's the highest-grossing actor in history. Yet when it comes to awards, to prestige, to the roles that win Oscars, he's often overlooked. He knows it. He's spoken about it. But he never begs. Because he knows his worth isn't in gold statues, it's in the people who see themselves in him. Still, the scars remain. Even today, Jackson is vocal about mental health, especially in the Black community. He's a fierce advocate for sobriety, urging young actors to ask for help before it's too late. He supports recovery programs and regularly returns to speak at rehab centers, because he knows what it's like to be talented and broken, brilliant and self-destructive, alive but hollow. In many ways, his greatest performance hasn't been in film. It's been in life, staying clean, staying married, staying alive. At the end of it all, after the fame, the billion-dollar franchises, the unforgettable monologues, and the Hollywood records, Samuel L. Jackson's most powerful role wasn't on screen. It was the role of a man who refused to die the way he was raised, not broken, not bitter, not buried by silence. Samuel L. Jackson didn't just act, he transformed. He flipped pain into presence. He turned addiction into advocacy. He took everything the world said would destroy him: fatherlessness, poverty, a stutter, systemic racism, drug abuse, and used it to build a legacy so loud, so unforgettable that even Hollywood had to bow. But the real story isn't about the box office. It's about a man who went from being passed out on his kitchen floor to mentoring the next generation of actors investing in Black art, standing beside his wife of over 40 years, and showing up again and again for the people who once thought someone like him couldn't survive. In a business that demands perfection and thrives on downfall, Samuel never pretended to be flawless. He just stayed real. And because of that, millions found healing in his rage, strength in his sarcasm, and hope in his survival. He once said, "My whole thing is to always be honest, be truthful." And that honesty, it's what made him great. Not the awards, not the franchises, not even the fame. The truth made him unforgettable. So what can we take from Samuel L. Jackson's journey? That redemption is real. That it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. That your story, no matter how broken, can still become someone else's lifeline. Now it's your turn. Which Samuel L. Jackson performance changed the way you see yourself or the world? Drop it in the comments. Let's honor the man who showed us that greatness doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from surviving your truth. Like this video. Subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence. Share it with someone who needs to know that their story still matters. Because Samuel L. Jackson didn't just change cinema, he changed what Black resilience looks like on screen and off.